Some guy was trying to sell his Jimmy John's franchise. He'd run it into the ground. None of the franchisees would buy it because it was a disaster.
I don't care. If you think it's a good idea, go build it, get it in front of them, and see if it sticks.
Okay, I got to find a way to make this work. That's kind of how I entered the industry.
Welcome to the next episode of the Entrepreneurial Excellence Podcast. Before building AI for restaurants, today's guest lived the restaurant grind firsthand. Matt Wampler didn't start as a SaaS founder. He started as an operator. He scaled Jimmy John's franchises across the DC, Maryland region. One of my favorite restaurants. I'll tell a funny story at some point about that. Grew revenues by over 600%, navigated the staffing chaos, inventory, waste, and razor-thin margins, and ultimately exited the business. He later moved into medical device innovation acquisitions, operating in environments where mistakes carry serious consequences and systems matter deeply. Today, he's the CEO and co-founder of ClearCOGS, a prescriptive AI platform helping restaurant owners move beyond gut instinct towards clear, actionable decisions across demand forecasting, staffing, and inventory. This episode isn't about AI hype. It's about operator empathy, decision discipline, and what entrepreneurial excellence looks like when every decision has real-world consequences. Matt, welcome to the show.
Adam, thank you for having me on. I want to go on record. We were drinking plenty of coffee back in the restaurant days.
All right. I probably imagine that you probably have to, right? You're starting, how early, like a lot of my audience, you're like, they're tech founders, things like that, right? Like they probably don't get it. How early does a restaurateur, if you're owning a restaurant, how early do you need to get up in the morning to get started? And it probably depends on the restaurant, of course, but like, what's that usually look like?
5 a.m. And frankly, for years, I would get up at 5 a.m. and go pick up my general manager or assistant manager and drop them off at one restaurant because they didn't have a car. And then you go start veggie prep. Like you are that first 4 hours, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. Man, it was a machine.
And when did the day usually end too for you?
I mean, my last manager would get out at like 4 a.m. So, there's things going on 22 hours a day. Your most important hours are those early hours, getting prepped, getting everything ready for the day. And then everything that goes wrong is always at the end of the day. The college kid shattered the door, the toilet's backed up. So it's 24/7.
Okay. So why does anyone ever get into the restaurant business?
Food and the people, right? Everybody loves restaurants, right? It's that magical place where we make connections with one another. We share our best moments. And so we all think, man, if I could just do that with my life, like how great would that be? And then you pretty much figure out once you start that there's a whole business behind the business, and all the things that make you successful are not the things necessarily people enjoy or got into the business for.
So also want to talk, okay, yeah, so that's a very fascinating point too. Before we get too deep on that, this sort of relates to so key question I ask everybody when I start the show every time is, what do you define as entrepreneurial excellence? What is your definition of that in general?
I have never actually defined entrepreneurial excellence in my mind before. So I'm giving you my first answer on this.
Good instinct. Let's hear it.
Look, when I think of entrepreneurs, I think of people that want to create something that doesn't exist or bring their vision of the world to fruition. So what does excellence look like? It is, being able to dream up something and then have the backbone and execution to make it happen. I think it's different for everybody.
So in the restaurant business, you've obviously done your own. So like walk us through what that actually looked like for, how did you get into the restaurant business in the first place? What made you decide it was the place you wanted to be a part of? And then why like Jimmy John's franchises of all things?
If you've ever seen the FX show, The Bear.
Of course. And I definitely have. I hope lots of people have. It's a great show. Fourth season, a little bit questionable, but it's a good show.
I had to turn off the first episode like 3 times before I eventually made it through it, just because it was almost PTSD. No, I got into it as a fluke. Some guy was trying to sell his Jimmy John's franchise. He'd run it into the ground. None of the franchisees would buy it because it was a disaster. And somehow I got the opportunity to come in and become a restaurant owner right out of college. I was like 21 years old and got to buy it for pennies on the dollar. And so I was just thrust into this world. I did not come from the restaurant industry. I didn't know much about it. I got a part-time job at a Jimmy John's my senior year of college so that I'd have some background in it. But then I just got thrown in. And I mean, I remember walking into this day, first day, and like all you could smell was the grease trap. Like they had not cleaned it out in God knows how long. The air conditioning was out. It was 110 degrees in there. They had ice buckets on top of the cold table compressors to keep them from overheating. And it was like, okay, I got to find a way to make this work. That's kind of how I entered the industry.
What made you think as a 21-year-old coming out of college, you should go buy a franchise, even if you have the opportunity, right? Like people have lots of opportunities to do things. Usually when you're that young, it's like, you're the dumb one. You're the dumb one someone's foisting this upon because you don't know better. Like, why did that opportunity come your way? Number one. Number two, could you afford it? Even if you're buying it for pennies on the dollar, how could you afford it? And three, why did anyone who gave you or helped you get the money to buy it think that it would be a good idea when everyone else who knew the industry said, this is a dumpster fire, we're not touching it, and it's just going to fail?
First off, when you're 21, you don't think about being successful. You know you're going to be successful.
Sure.
You know this is the right move. So, full steam ahead. I'm like, I will figure this out. Secondly, I was the ADD dyslexic kid that was not the world's greatest academically, and I had the option of going and doing investment banking or going in and trying to buy this restaurant. And something about the lifestyle of, being on your feet, building something just kind of called to me. So I talked to my parents, and they had a little bit of money saved up for me to go to grad school. I convinced them to give it to me as a loan. I went and convinced a bank to give me the rest, and then the little seller financing on top of that. And somehow it all just kind of came together.
And so, okay, still, like, that is a risky decision, right? Where your parents are freaking out. They're like, okay, like, our son could go to be an investment banker, safe job, going to go make a lot of money on Wall Street. And instead, he's going to take out a bunch of debt, basically, and buy a failing franchise.
I give my dad a lot of credit. His philosophy on this was make mistakes when you're young. You have nothing to lose. If it all goes wrong and you have to file for bankruptcy, no sweat off your back, right? You can rebuild your career. Take risks when you're young. You don't have a family. Get after it. And that gave me the opportunity to go try and make something happen.
And speaking of your parents briefly, what are your parents' backgrounds?
Yeah, small town lawyer from Champaign, Illinois. And my mom was a stewardess that retired to stay at home with the kids when, I was born. So it was, kind of a middle-class upbringing in rural Illinois.
Wow. And how many siblings do you have?
I have a brother and a sister, both younger.
Okay. So three kids. And are they also entrepreneurs?
Yeah, my brother went the investment banking route, and my sister is a high-end hairstylist.
Wow. Okay. So you all went different directions.
We're all over the place.
Yeah. Okay. So fine. Your dad's like, make mistakes early, you can recover. Awesome philosophy. And then, so you buy this failing franchise, and you're this 21-year-old coming in. Your employees are like your age, probably.
Yeah. Older. That was actually one of the hardest things. Was I was younger than a lot of the employees. My managers were older than me, and they knew more about restaurants than me, but I was the guy in charge and had never done it before.
So what did they think of that? They must have been like, okay, here's like the quote unquote rich kid. They probably thought you were some rich kid coming in who were able to, like, why didn't any of them buy the franchise? They knew it. They probably had an opportunity. Why weren't they pulling it off? And instead, here's this sort of rich kid coming in, not rich, but like they might have viewed it that way. And yeah, I mean, he's getting
some guy who has no idea what he's doing is now in charge. And I think the scarier thing was the prior owner was an absentee owner. So they didn't have any oversight. So now you've got someone who's going to be living there, working hip to hip with you, that's watching everything you're doing. This is a failing restaurant. Anybody who's run a restaurant before will tell you there's probably a lot of things going really wrong in the organization. And there were. And the way they reacted to it was, look, we only had like 5 employees when I took over. But I think within like 3 or 4 weeks, one of the assistant managers pulled me aside and basically said, look, I got another job offer. You better double my salary or I'm going to walk. I didn't have any money. The store wasn't doing well. It was losing money. And I didn't have any option. And so I kind of put this fork in the road. Do I want to be beholden to one of these managers who's not very good, but I really need right now? Or am I going to just let him go and have a whole lot of pain?
What did you choose?
A whole lot of pain.
That's what I figured. I think that's generally the right call for a lot of founders. If you never want to be beholden to anyone, an employee, customer, vendor, you name it, who gives you ultimatums, and works in that way. And it's just like
people that want to see your mission, your drive. You want to see people that want to see that come to success. So like, I remember, we had 14 manager shifts, basically 12 hours a shift. This left me with me and one other manager. So I ended up with 10 management shifts. So 120 hours a week. And I think basically 4 of the days I had, or 3 of the days, it was a 24-hour shift. So like I would sleep in the back of the store. And this magical thing started to happen. All of the employees that would see you there all day, every day, grinding it out, that you're tired, you haven't slept, they wanted to help. They're like, Matt, I got this. Between shifts, go home and get some sleep, right? And I'd be freaked out that like we need to get the ice machine clean. They'd be like, I got the ice machine, right? But all of a sudden it was a rallying cry for like, how can we make this work as a team? And that really brought us together. And it would not have if we'd have gone the other direction.
Yeah. So that's, talk me through cultural shifts. Like what was the cultural mindset you brought in? Was it just like working super hard? Like how did you, and then how did you apply that, right? I mean, you expanded, let's talk about expansion as well. Like you applied that same mindset, obviously, to a lot of different stores. And it's one thing if you're there in person at that single store, you can't multiply yourself across dozens or hundreds of stores.
I give all the credit to one of my mentors on this. He called me right before, like the day I was taking over. He said, Matt, what's your plan? I said, I'm going to go in there. We're going to change everything. We're going to do X, Y, and Z. We're going to get everything, best practices. He said, Matt, that's a horrible idea. People don't like change. You're going to come in and try and change everything. It's going to cause chaos. People are going to leave. Go in quiet and just start doing the work yourself. Go clean the grease trap. One thing every day. And people will see that you're starting to make things better. They'll start to see accomplishments and then they'll start to join. And I really think that was the right direction. It got us on that course where once you got things moving in the right direction, it felt like all the momentum was pushing us to be better every week.
And so, okay, so that was that, by the way, that's great advice from your mentor. I think a lot of founders, myself included sometimes, want to just move really quickly and sort of like break things. It's like, let's just go, instead of understanding why things are being done a certain way. And it's also funny, we talk to our customers all the time, and we talk to our customers, we explain to them that like we're going to come in and help them with operations, right? We run their back office basically. And for them, we say, hey, look, we're never going to come in and make changes right away. We're first going to learn what you're doing and why. And then maybe we'll suggest a change, how to improve things. But we first want to understand it. And I think people really appreciate that. But it's hard as a founder sometimes to say, I'm going to sit here and learn from my team about why they're in this position.
Yeah, totally.
So, okay. So you go in, first sort of location, Jimmy John's. Then what? What happens in year 1, year 2, year 3, and then you start growing it?
The goal was to get to $1 million.
Is that normal? Is that a lot? Is that normal? Is that like what Jimmy John's expects?
Yeah, it's a little over what Jimmy John's expected, but like, at least at the time. But the store was doing around $400,000 at the time.
So you have a big hole to dig out of.
We got a big hole.
What's your time frame to dig out of it? Like, does Jimmy John's at some point shut down a failing restaurant, or you just have to cover the...
Jimmy John's doesn't care, right? You send us our royalties, make sure you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, right? But it's you that have signed personally on the lease and the bank loans. It's you that's at stake.
Right. So just so I understand the franchise business, because not what I understand too well, they essentially say, okay, look, you owe us a certain amount for this franchisee to put the Jimmy John's name and buy our special food and materials, everything else that makes this Jimmy John's. You then have a lease payment you got to make, and you can negotiate that however you want. You have to pay your employees whatever you want to pay them, all that other stuff, and make it work or don't. At what point, though, does Jimmy John's step in and be like, you're making our company brand look bad because like your store is so terrible?
Well, I think that's how I ended up getting one, was that eventually a restaurant got that bad that they needed to find a solution and nobody else wanted to do it.
Okay, so they sort of kick out. They have the option to sort of kick someone out, or
they have the ability to. All these franchises do. They rarely do it. It's a really ugly process, but technically they can.
Okay, so that's sort of why you got in there. So you come in, they're expecting, they're not. You have all these other costs. I assume at $400K a year, you're losing money.
Oh yeah, hand over fist.
Okay, so how quickly do you turn it around and get it to a place it needs to be?
About 18 months. 18 months, we took it from $400,000 to $1.2 million.
Wow. Okay. So you're like, this is working. How much sleep did you get in that 18 months?
Not a whole lot. I remember there was this moment, I think maybe 4 months in, I'd lost I think it was 30 pounds in the first month. You're just working nonstop. And
Even
there was
having all the free sandwiches you possibly could want there.
yeah, but you're on your feet, you're moving like, yeah, and you get sick of the food eventually.
Of course.
But I remember I was sitting there, we got a letter from the franchise and it said that there was an error in our franchise agreement and that technically we could get out of it. I don't even know what that means. But at like 2 a.m. one night after a 22-hour shift, I'm just like, I can't do it anymore. And I signed this document to turn in my franchise agreement. And I'm like, I'm just going to give up. And I put it in the top part of the safe and then immediately fell asleep at the desk. 9 months later, I kid you not, I go to clean out the safe and I find this letter and I had totally forgotten the entire situation that happened. And at that point, we'd gotten things back on the right track. I was signed to open up stores 2 and 3 and we were off to the races, but it was that close.
That's pretty funny that like it was that close and like that a twist of fate of you being just so tired and led to you continuing to build in being where you are today. So, okay. So then how many stores do you grow from one money losing store to how many?
5
Okay.
Before I sold.
Okay. And what made you decide to sell after you got to 5 stores?
Your life changes, right? We went over the schedule. It's long hours, it's early mornings, it's late nights. Me and my wife were starting to have kids. I ended up getting into Duke to go to grad school. And I just said, you know what? This is a season of my life where maybe I should take a pause, right? I'm going to go get, a great MBA. And then I always thought I'd come back into Jimmy John's.
But how do other people make it work, right? I mean, there's some of these companies and families that are like massive franchisees who own hundreds of them, and they're just multimillionaires hundreds of times over, and somehow make it work, right? They're not working the crazy hours. They have good family lives, going on lots of vacations, all that.
Yes, that's true, but somebody is in the organization.
Sure.
So you do have to come to terms with I have a lot of people that are up working in the middle of the night, and I'm worried about lawsuits, and I'm worried about, getting that next area manager that's going to work 80, 90 hours a week and be super stressed out. While you're right, there is the top level. I've got 100 locations and I've got vice presidents and area managers. You're still running an organization that has a lot of people that are doing really difficult, stressful, tiring work.
On that note, then, what was the hardest part of managing, even with the five franchisees? What was the hardest part? Was it the people? Was it the people? Okay.
The restaurants is the people business. It's people managing people, serving people. And in that world, your job is to take the 18-year-old kid that didn't go to college, that doesn't know anything about restaurants, and to turn him into a 22-year-old general manager that can, basically run $1 million enterprise on their own. And that takes a lot, right? You're constantly hiring, you're constantly promoting, you're constantly firing.
What lessons did you learn there? What are key takeaways? You're like, if this is how to really hire the right 18-year-old and train them up versus the ones who are going to fail.
Okay, so the 2 lessons that I learned, one, it's way easier to hire a new person and retrain them or train them up the first time than it is to try and change existing habits with, your current employees, which is, it's a little counterintuitive, but if you've got a real problem, a lot of times it was better off to just start fresh with new staff and build up from there.
Was that because the people who had so if you were hiring either people who were already there or people who had sort of quote unquote restaurant experience, they had habits and they just were unwilling to change?
No, it's really more when you go into a new job, the first couple of weeks, you're a blank slate. You're like, tell me how to do my job and how I'm doing at it. But once I've done something for a year the same way, it's really hard to change. Your brain's just in a different space.
Okay. So, but then how do you create the right training programs to make sure that you're training that 18-year-old up?
I was never good at this. Frankly, I relied on culture. So if you built the right culture of holding each other accountable and we're striving for the best and this is how we view the world, a lot of those training things took care of themselves. I frankly was not the best at having an organized training program.
Did Jimmy John's didn't provide a sort of training program?
A little bit, but no, not really. They tell you how you're supposed to do things, when you're supposed to do things, but that's different than training people how to do those things and follow them.
Got it. And then for building the team up, so you're hiring these new people, and then did you have an HR manager? Do people just apply online? They drop their resumes off at a restaurant and be like, I want a job, and the manager is in charge, does an interview right there?
I don't think back then we were even doing online applications. I had literally printed out applications and we would hand them out to people. We would ask you to give it to your friend. I think there was a stack sitting there next to the bags and the menus, and we'd just interview people whenever they came in.
Wow.
Not the best way to do things.
No, but it sounds like it worked out okay. And then what made you decide to sell? I mean, or tell me why to sell it, but like, how did you figure out a price, a buyer? What did that look like to actually go through the sales process and be like, all right, like I'm going off to business school and this chapter's closed?
Yeah, I mean, look, that's the beautiful thing about a franchise. You've got a lot of other franchisees that know the business, they know how to evaluate the business. You've got a network you can call on. So it really just comes down to, what are your sales? What are your profits? Let's multiply it by 4 and, you find the right deal.
Is that what the deals are? It's about a 4X?
Yeah, typically a 4X cash flow.
Okay. So not terrible. I mean, you can make some good money on that then.
Yeah.
Nice. So then before we move off of the Jimmy John stuff, I just have to say my one Jimmy John story because I will always remember it. I went to Vanderbilt and there's a Jimmy John basically across the street from my dorm my senior year. And whenever we were sort of like hungover from a night of like partying in my fraternity, we would want to go get Jimmy John's, I think number 9, like the Italian, like,
oh yeah, Italian nightclub,
the stinkiest sandwich ever. And would just sit there and like go across the street, go pick it up, go sit and like watch TV with the lights, like the windows, like the shades drawn because we just weren't feeling good. It was just so stinky, but also delicious at the time. I was like, that was college par excellence in some ways, but it was so stinky.
That was my reward whenever I worked the bar rush shift. You'd get out at like 4 a.m. I would do an Italian nightclub with bacon on it. And like, I'd get to have that at 5 a.m. while my wife's having coffee, getting ready to go to work.
She must have hated you. I can't imagine. Like, she's like having coffee, trying to get her day started, and has this like just such a strong smelling sandwich with the oily vinegar and everything else on it. It was a lot. Those were good memories though. Good times. Although we also went to Jersey Mike's a lot too. They were a Jersey Mike's right close to the Jimmy John's.
Love Jersey Mike's.
Yeah. So they were sort of very different, but also sort of obviously both making sandwiches, so similar. Okay, so finish that part of your life. You go to business school. Walk me through the next chapter of your life. Like what got you into ClearCOGS and what you're doing right now, and the biomedical stuff that I think you did. Like all these things. Where did all that take you in life next?
Yeah, I mean, it was somewhat of a scary moment for me because you go to business school and you kind of realize, okay, I have this one really specific skill set. And that is running this type of franchise restaurants. I don't know exactly where I fit into the world. So kind of have to reinvent yourself. And I think one of the takeaways I had, to be successful as a franchisee, your job is to execute. Jimmy John's gave me the playbook every day. My job was to follow the playbook and execute as well as I can. It's the reason we were able to turn it around.
To ask where I started to pause there, like, I assume part of, and maybe this sort of a thesis I have just about entrepreneurial excellence in general, is sometimes it's the people who execute the best on a regular basis over and over again who actually are successful. And does that hold true in the franchisee business? Like the most successful franchisees are the ones who just really know how to execute because they're following the playbook.
That is the franchisee business to a T. You are buying these systems and procedures that are tried and true, and your job is literally just to execute them as flawlessly as you can every day.
Why do franchisees fail then, right? In some ways you'd say, okay, it's easy. You have a playbook, follow it. And yet obviously you bought one that was failing, and I'm sure lots and lots of other franchisees also fail. So where do they go wrong?
And just because something's easy doesn't make it not hard, right? It was simple. You need to follow these, but following those is really difficult. It's staying an extra 2 hours to get your slicing done. It's, making sure that when you clean the mop guards, you're cleaning every single tile across the whole store, that you're checking the light bulbs every morning to make sure every light works, that you're cleaning the door off every shift. It's all these little things that it's so easy to just give in to the willpower and say, it's good enough. I don't need to do that extra, mile.
Mm-hmm. What then? Okay, so once again, are there things you've learned from other franchisees or the work you did too that like helped get them to a level where it's like, hey, we can keep following this playbook? And then how do you apply that to other parts of your life, right? Where it's like, have a good playbook, just follow it.
Yeah, I think, ironically, I took it the other way. So the thing that I loved was the 2% that wasn't in the playbook. Like, I loved the creative problem solving. I loved getting to model things out on Excel spreadsheets and create tracking tools. Like, that was my passion. And so, you go back to grad school and you realize, like, oh my gosh, not every job is just follow the playbook. There are jobs out there where, maybe half the time you get to do creative problem solving. And so I think that was one of the things that really pushed me towards where can I go work and, put my energy into something that doesn't have a playbook where I could get to create.
Okay, so then you go to grad school to go do that. Get out of grad school, then what?
I go into my one and only corporate job. It was in medical devices. It was like director of innovation. And I hated everything about it. It was slow. It was regulated. The decisions you make today, you'll find out in 4 years whether they panned out. You realize that the way restaurants work with short feedback loops and very direct communication is different than the world of corporate with boards and committees and building consensus. And I learned that was not the right spot for me.
Fair enough. Okay, and then what? So you jump out of that.
Learned the code. I'd always wanted to. The pandemic hit. Started learning the code. Loved everything about it. I think I took it was like a 9-part online course. Still today, the best educational program I've ever done. And
you didn't need that fancy MBA from Duke. You could have just taken an online course for free or for a few $100.
Totally. At least for learning this specific skill set. And I was maybe 5 modules in before I had already started a data analytics consulting group where I was going out to work with small businesses to, build out statistical models to help them make better decisions, help them make better marketing decisions. Just loved everything about it.
And okay, so you loved everything about it. And is that what led to ClearCOGS?
Yeah, basically. I mean, my core identity was in restaurant operations. You tend to think of everything through restaurants and, finally realizing that, you didn't have to manage your business on Excel spreadsheets and guessing, but you could bring in predictive analytics made too much sense. So around then I called my now co-founder Osa and I said, look, I think there's something here for restaurants. I don't know what it is, but I think there's an opportunity. And we probably went and talked to 50 restaurant groups. And this is where I give Osa all the credit. We'd ask them what it is that they needed from technology. And they would always give some answer. I need a dashboard. I need a this or that. And Osa would always say, wait, why do you need that? And if you just kept asking why a few times, it always came back to the same problem. Restaurants don't know who's going to walk in tomorrow. And because they don't know who's going to walk in tomorrow, they make inefficient decisions on what to order, what to prep, who to staff. And we said, okay, that's a core problem that we could go solve at the root through predictive analytics. And so with that, we started ClearCOGS. We started out as restaurant analytics to become ClearCOGS. So let's go solve the problem of knowing the future for restaurants.
Okay, so this sounds awesome. At a high level, so basically what you're saying, let me make sure I can see if I can explain it. You're essentially able to do some predictive work to say, we expect X number of people to show up tomorrow based on historical data, you're looking at maybe data around the neighborhood, the city, macroeconomic, I don't know what all the data you're looking at. You should talk through that. And that leads to me to say, okay, I expect you're going to have 100 diners tomorrow. Therefore, these are your dishes. Therefore, you need this much food, this much staffing and everything else. And then you're getting into the world of being able to match up your cost of goods sold with your actual revenue and leads to hopefully higher profit.
Yeah. AI is really good at pattern matching, right? You look at, autocomplete. When I type into Google, what is the next thing that populates? Weather today. That is all just predicting what is the next word in a sequence. What we do is time series forecasting. It's predicting the next number in a sequence. It's something that machine learning AI is really good at. So what we do is we digest all of a restaurant's data, and then we'll go look and let's use Jimmy John's as an example. We'll look at a number of Jimmy John's. We'll go look at how many sticks of bread are you using every 15 minutes and have been for the last 10 years. How does weather affect that? How do your limited time offerings affect that? How do events in the area, affect that? And that gives us this crystal ball of what is going to happen in the future. Where it gets really great is now that you have this crystal ball, the statistical model of what can happen, you could start moneyballing restaurant operations. Just like the NFL team going for it on fourth down. What do the analytics say? We can make those same determinations for a restaurant. It's 2 hours prior to close. Do I bake that extra cycle of bread, or can I shut the ovens off and start cleaning? So, it's not just being able to see the future, but it's being able to determine what outcome I want to have, and then statistically getting the right number to the team so you get there.
So how's the company going? Because in some ways it sounds like amazing, right? This is like magical. Every restaurant in the world should be using it. Yet I'm sure that's not quite the case today. I mean, I know you raised almost like 4 million or so. But like, where's it at?
It's going great. I mean, I think we're over 1,000 restaurants across 4 countries, and growing. I think we'll double this quarter alone.
Wow.
But it's not without its challenges. Restaurants are tough. They are way behind in technology, which is great because we can make such a difference in their world. But also, there's a reason they're really behind in technology. It's because they're not the best at adopting right? So it's always a new challenge. But
so actually, walk through that, right? So you're going into a world, a space that is bad at adopting technology. I presume to do your job well, you need a bunch of data about that restaurant and be able to get kind of real-time feeds, and yet they don't have any of that data. So like, how do you build them up and then do it in a way that is margin efficient for you as a business without having to customize so much for each little restaurant?
Ironically, it's not a data issue. It's actually not even a technology issue. They've got all the data. It's all backed up in their POS. So like, we can get all of the data.
And do they use standardized POSs at this point, most restaurants?
No, the POS data is awful.
Okay, so if the data is awful, do you have to clean it? Do you have to...
Yeah, we have to standardize it. Probably 60% of what we do is really unsexy, and it's just data cleaning is standardizing.
Okay, so you're really good at standardizing the data, but they have the data. It's just in the POS somewhere.
Yeah, the hard part is this. It's change management. It's people management, implementation. How do you get somebody who has spent 10 years developing, as they would say, having their finger on the pulse of the operation? They know, it's a rainy Friday. I'm going to prep a little more, a little less, and I do it in bins. And this is the way I do things. And say, okay, well, we can use technology to do that better. They're not quick to just say, oh, well, I'll just abandon the thing that I'm so prideful of and I've gotten really good at, even though there's a better option. It's having the number is one thing. Getting people to buy in, see the vision, and use it is much more difficult.
So I agree. What have you found as ways to get people to buy in and do that vision? Because this is a struggle I see with so many companies and so many teams. There's new technology. They don't want to adopt. They either don't buy into what it actually claims it's going to do, or they just fight against it because it is a change.
One, you got to deliver it where they live. So fancy AI company, we build all kinds of technology. We service the vast majority of our restaurants via email. It's push notifications to them. It's already, basically tailored to their operation. But that's, where the employee lives, on their phone via email. They don't want to log into another platform. So
it goes like the manager or the employee there be like, hey, don't bake any more bread today. We think you should be done.
More like this is how much bread you should have right now. You can go look, see where you're at, and then make a determination. But push notifications to them versus asking them to do something, right? You have to make it easier for them to use your system than it is for them to, do whatever they were doing prior to this.
Yeah. Okay. So right. That makes sense. So make it easy for them to do it. And then how do you incentivize them to also do it? Like, in other words, like, it's one thing to say, okay, we're making it easy for you to do. It's another to say, like, I'm actually going to pay attention to this email and do it.
I did this. I had a problem when I was running restaurants, and that was I'd have low volume locations that we wanted to have their deliveries get out the door sooner. And there was no reason.
Deliveries, you mean like delivery service picking it up sort of thing? Or
so back then we delivered in-house.
Try to forget.
So like I'd have delivery drivers, they're sitting around. And the high volume places, you're just pumping out. So like you're pumping it out, you've got a ton of drivers on the road. So there was this bias. The little guys were like, or the lower volume stores were like, well, we can't have as fast out the door times. But I always sat there and said, you've only got one delivery this hour and you've got a driver there. You should make it in like 30 seconds and get it out super fast. I tried everything. I tried incentives. I tried penalizing. The thing that worked was I started ranking managers and out the door times. And I kid you not, the out the door times dropped immediately. We've taken a similar approach. So we will rank different managers or different stores on how well they're adhering. And it's crazy, but it works. People are okay with not being the most profitable restaurant, but they are not okay with being an incompetent manager.
So is this, by the way, is this across all of your companies, or is it within like a restaurant group sort of thing?
Yeah, it's typically within a restaurant group.
And do you publicize the names of the people, or just like in other words, like, does it say Adam was here, John was here, Matt is here, or is it like, you know yourself, it says Adam is here, but you don't know who the other people are around you?
We're not that punitive. We're not throwing anybody under the bus. So it's just stores, locations.
Okay, it's funny. We've talked about doing something similar at my company, in a few different ways. And we're going to show people like, hey, here's how you rank against everyone else. We're still doing that, but now it's without their, it's just their name compared to the rest of the team. So you kind of know where you stand compared to everyone else, but you don't know who's like way above you, who's below you. The downside of that, though, to be clear, is then they don't know who they can go to emulate. You don't know, well, who is the person that's doing great and I can emulate them. But you also don't want to be embarrassed if you're like the lowest performer.
Well, so that was the problem I'd run into. So I was not doing a ranking and showing where you fell, but I would tell them like, hey, this store is underperforming compared to the other stores. Here's a store that's doing better. Once they knew that the other managers were going to see their name at the bottom of the list, that was the thing that really moved the needle.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. And it didn't take any extra money. You don't have to incentivize people. It's just what do you attribute that to? Is it just a social?
And it was a positive, right? I really wasn't targeting, the worst person there. It's let's celebrate who's the best and who's moved up this week, right? But I go back to it to say it's that kind of stuff that really matters in the restaurant world. It's the people side of the business. It's not the greatest technology, right? If you came up with it's important to have great technology, right? But the most sophisticated high-end model is useless to a restaurant if they can't actually use it or digest it, or it's too much work for them to use.
Okay, in ClearCOGS itself, though, is a sort of SaaS company. You have what, like 15 people on the team or so?
Yeah.
So how do you do that internally? What do you do to run the company, the team that's different than the restaurant business? Or is it really similar, even though they're completely different industries?
It's really different. I think the best way I'd categorize it is in restaurants, everything was immediate, but not necessarily important. That's to say, the toilet is clogged and it's flooding the bathroom. That's something that needs your immediate attention, but is not going to fundamentally change the nature of the business. On the technology side, everything's really important, but not a lot of it is that immediate. You're making decisions today that are going to pan out in the next 3 to 6 months. And I would say that, the hardest thing for me personally is I tend to be more in the moment. What are we working on right now? And when you're looking at longer time horizon projects, it's how do you get everyone to march in the same direction over a long period of time, keeping everyone aligned.
So on the note of alignment, how are you dealing with the focus of going to market for that? Like what I've seen with people who try to sell to restaurants, and it's funny, I was an investor in a restaurant kind of tech company 20 years ago, right? So this was a long time ago. It's actually
tell me it was Toast.
It wasn't, no, I wish. It wasn't Toast. It was before Toast. It was like forever ago. Wasn't it my investment? I actually got convinced my dad to put a little bit of money into the company. It was like pre all these things. Right, it was like made total sense, all those things, and people have been trying for forever to sell to restaurants and make it work. And I live in San Francisco. Every year, every month, really, you see some new sticker for some new software company that's working with this restaurant, and I'm like, oh, there's a million that have come and gone. Maybe the only ones that have actually stuck around have been like Square payment for like a POS, and like that feels like it. And now I can use Apple Pay everywhere. That's basically it. Like, how do you go sell to restaurants in a successful way?
Well, look, it's tough. There's no easy button. I wish I had an answer for you that was the one thing we did that really differentiated.
Doubling quarter over quarter, which it sounds like you're doing, is what it sounds like you've hit on some strategy.
So my journey on this was early on, I was looking for the thing we were going to do different that was going to allow us to sell and scale quicker than everybody else. Having done this for a number of years, I've really just come to the conclusion that it's just a lot of work and grinding it out. It's making marginal changes every day that are just marginally better to make the process as a whole better. And that's, all right, we're out doing outbound. What's the right message? What's the right time? What are we hearing today? What can we change tomorrow? There's not one thing.
And so are you going in person to all these restaurants? I mean, you're talking with restaurants all over the US, I'm guessing. So
we are.
And then
look, it's an omni-channel approach. So look, we invest heavily in social media. And when I say invest, it's an investment of time, right? How do you become a thought leader? How do you put out content that people want to engage with and build trust, show that you have empathy for the businesses that you work with, share your success stories. We get a lot of referrals via AI today. People are looking it up. They're wanting a solution to this problem. They're coming as far more informed consumers than they ever have been. And then there's just the good old fashioned, we call restaurants. We show up to trade shows. We send emails. You've got to do a little bit of everything. And it's always changing as to what's working and what's not.
How are you able to convince a restaurant to do a test with you? Like how much work is it to get started? How focused are you on the ability to get started and show value early on?
Well, part of it is this. They want to know that you actually care. So having empathy for the restaurants. It's nice to say, I've been in the industry. I know what you're going through, right? I wouldn't just sell you a bad product just to make money off you, right? Because that's their greatest fear. What we have found is that the hardest thing to do is to get them to envision the world that they would live in with you, right? There's part of the conversation where they're coming up with all the reasons why they don't want to work with you.
Right, which is usually what most buyers are like, right? Like they kind of know they need a solution. So maybe they reach out to you, but they're like, oh, it's too expensive. It's too hard. There's a million no. There's a million ways to get to no. And one golden way to get to yes is sort of
yeah. And the thing we found is we listen to their problems, what their priorities are. We fundamentally say, our belief is that restaurants will run more profitably and more systematically if they know the future in advance. Do you believe that as well? Typically the restaurant says, yeah, I could believe that. That makes sense. If I knew what was coming ahead of time, we probably would run a better operation. And once you've got that solid building block, they can start to envision that world. And then you can build to it together.
I like that. I think that's probably a good reminder for all sales, help them envision the future.
Get used to the idea of working with you.
Yeah, exactly. Then where do things go for you all as a company? What are the big next steps? How do you keep growing it? What does then that look like for you from an entrepreneurial sort of success level?
Yeah, I mean, this is just the start for us. Fundamentally, we believe that all of the way for restaurants to make more money is through predictive analytics, moving from reactive to proactive, right? Almost that moneyball. That's the foundation. Where it goes from there, once you have that in place, is how do you get, a fractional CFO, COO that's sitting on top of your data and doing all of the work that you don't want to do? So, no one gets into restaurants to do inventory or manage spreadsheets or, figure out what to order. But unfortunately, it's the cold analytics like that, separate profitable restaurants from not profitable restaurants. So all the people that get into it for the people side, to make great food and delight their customers, right? We want them to focus on that. And we'd like to have a predictive analytics, that moneyball system sitting on top of their data, just feeding them the answers that they need so that they just don't have to worry about the cold analytics of the business.
And okay, so this is a key point for every entrepreneur that I care deeply about, is essentially the idea of working in the business versus on the business, right? It's a very historical problem.
Yeah. Well put. Yeah.
And this is, there are a number of books that have come out about this forever. If everyone starts a business, they're all excited. And next thing you know, they're not baking the pies anymore that they care about. They're dealing with how to hire people and fire people and order inventory and keep a store working. And it's all the other things. How does a founder, is it about delegation? Is it about finding better technology? What is it about so you can get back to the thing that you love and that you are good at?
Vantage point of as a technology company or from a restaurant?
Both. I mean, arguably, I think they're probably, I don't think they're actually all that different, arguably. But let me know what you think.
I don't either, actually. For me, and this is probably a bias having come from the restaurant world, I think it's all about the people. How do I get great people to buy into the same vision and get them on the team?
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the biggest flaws I have is actually ended up building a habit or a strength of mine. And I always think things are going to be easier than they are and that I can do them. I get about halfway through and realize I can't do this. This is way too hard. And then I go find somebody that's way smarter than me that can do it way better than me and bring them in to help me finish it.
What's that pain point though? So that's the right mindset that I actually agree with. What's that? When does that pain become so high that you think it's worthwhile to spend money to offload it and delegate that thing away that you're not good at and that you don't enjoy?
And then another one I give OSA credit for, and this is from a programming perspective. I always wanted to build product. And, it's ironic, but the engineers are always like, no, we're not going to build that. Like, do it manually. And it just seemed ironic that the people that actually can build it were telling you to go do it manually. But it's probably been one of the greatest practices that I've, started to do. And that is I do things manually until there's nothing else to figure out. And it's just a waste of time that I'm doing every day. For instance, we do an outbound analytics report every morning. And that is I take a bunch of our CRM data, I feed it into AI, I ask a few questions, I put together a report, I send it to the team every morning. I did that myself over and over again every day for the last 3 weeks. Yesterday, I turned it over to another individual to do, right? And so I think that's the right mentality there. It's not about the pain, it's about almost the time and energy you're putting into it.
So I agree. It's funny. What you just described to me is something that I call Walter's Rule of 10. I call it that because my very first company, my co-founder was an amazing engineer, early Googler. And of course, I'm this, I'm a sort of product business guy. And I'm like, you can build anything. Let's go build it. And he was like, no, Adam, I'm not going to, his name is Walter. I'm not going to go build anything until you've done it manually 10 times and prove to me that there is a real business case for it.
Is this like 101 in software engineering school? They're like, hey guys, the first lesson we're going to teach you is people are going to ask you to do things. Just tell them no. They got to do it manually 10 times. They'll appreciate you so much more.
It must be or something, but because it was definitely like what happened. And I love that. It's a really important rule. And I try to tell my team the same thing nowadays. With that said, do you think AI changes that a bit? Like when you and I can go automate anything today, I can go vibe code essentially anything that I want and anything that I can imagine within an hour or two. Is that a different world than it used to be?
Okay, this is Adam. Great question. It's something that I've thought a lot about because I know just enough programming to be dangerous. And now I've got AI, so I can just build anything I want. I think it becomes even more important because I found of the dozen or so tools that I've built vibe coding, that only 3 or 4 of them have stuck around. And it's the things that I've ended up using day in and day out that have gotten better. And ultimately we go productize. But it's, when I say manually, maybe the definition of manual changes, but it's not I've got an idea. The team should go run with this idea because it's so much easier to implement. It's how can I use AI to manually do it myself 10 times before we do that. Otherwise, it's just so much stuff you're generating that most of it doesn't even get used. And eventually it's just noise.
I kind of agree with that. But then doesn't the question become that you should be building as many things as possible on a regular basis and then should essentially seeing, because the cost to build any new idea is so low now that you should have a million new ideas and everything should become a product. And then you see what sticks and see what the company wants. And then if it's good, you then productize it and make it better.
From that standpoint, I totally agree. And I've had this conversation with many people. We spent 6-9 months just asking people what it is that they wanted before we ever built anything so that we didn't waste our time and energy building in the wrong direction. Today, that barrier's just been lifted. So go do 10 different versions, see which one sticks.
It's funny. I've tried to tell my team the same thing. Like we're spinning up a pretty big product team to do some of this work. And they're like, oh, I want to go survey the team. I'm like, no, fuck surveys. Like, I don't care. If you think it's a good idea, go build it in a day, get it in front of them, and then see if it sticks. And if they don't like, yeah, you've learned. Go build something new. That's I don't need to survey anyone anymore and like wave a magic wand and hope I can predict the future. Just go build it.
I think one of the more concerning things is it's getting so good that you're now able to do things that you probably shouldn't do.
Like what?
So I wanted to categorize something with email, and I wrote something and put it in a certain location that I'm not going to say because it might not be the most secure. And I said, look at this amazing thing that I can now do. And my co-founder said, Matt, you can't do that. Like, here are the following security breaches that you might be in that we could get hacked as a result. So it is interesting. At some point, the AI is getting good enough that you're able to do things that you probably shouldn't be able to do that, an actual developer would know.
And so, okay, that's the different, similar issue, but or not similar, but like, yes, it's a very good point, and it is a huge risk. What happens when, and just speaking out like a little further, so this is an area that I'm thinking about a lot lately with AI. What you guys have built at ClearCOGS, very impressive, growing well. What happens when someone can vibe code ClearCOGS into existence?
So we actually launched a restaurant copilot back in 2023, maybe 2024, whatever it was. ChatGPT came out in November, and we launched a blog about ChatGPT. And it literally was on the front page of Google right when ChatGPT came out. I think we had like 50,000 people come to the website, and we said, this is really interesting. So we did another one, same deal. We ended up launching a beta program to build the restaurant copilot, which we trademarked at the time. We had a bunch of people sign up. And then we sat down with all the restaurants that basically said, oh, you mean I could go talk to your little chatbot, or you could just tell me the answers that you already know? Just tell me the answers. And going through this entire experiment, it was really interesting because we thought about what are the things that are hard and proprietary, and what are the things that are not. We kind of viewed the translation of information as being something that AI was ultimately going to do. But going through and cleaning a bunch of data, standardizing it, keeping models up to date with the newest algorithms and the right features, interacting with humans, this was a system that was going to be really, really hard. So we think that in a world of predictive analytics that is going to be an AI that's going to be a part of all of our lives and will be a part of restaurants, it's not that useful if I don't know what the future is going to be. So we felt like if we can just do this one thing better than anybody else, everyone will need it.
Okay. And then what does that mean for your like how has your product and engineering team changed what and how you build things given the rise of AI? Like you started sort of before it got really big. You obviously were on the really top end curve of this and adopting things, but it's pretty different today than it was 2 or 3 years ago.
And I should say, I definitely try and vibe code our system about every 6 months to see how close it gets. So far, it's not quite there.
Not quite there, but it's probably getting better every 6 months.
It's getting better every 6 months. It always exceeds my expectations.
And so given that, how do you feel as an entrepreneur? Like, sorry I'm asking these like sort of tough questions, but like, how do you feel as an entrepreneur where there's going to come a point where I'm going to be able to vibe code. I'm going to say like, I want to go talk to Claude Code and say, hey, I want to have a AI analytics product to help me predict what I need to be doing in my restaurant. And it asks all the right questions, pulls all the right data. Yeah, it's a bit of work here and there, but like I can go do it. Or someone random can go essentially recreate what you guys have built and all they just need to go do is sell it. And they tie together a bunch of AI salespeople too. That's way more efficient than you built. And boom, next thing you know, it's a company of one that has costs that are 10x lower than yours, et cetera, et cetera. And then like, does software have an existence? And this are a macro question, like, is software have a future?
Is my phone going to eventually be my everything, and it's going to be my back of house software, and whatever I want changed, it'll just do for me?
Yeah.
I think the way I look at it's this. The simple answer is I still run into people who don't know what ChatGPT is in the restaurant industry. Silicon Valley world is, way, way ahead of where, middle America is in a laggard industry like restaurants. I think the next question is there's a ton of companies that are just wrappers on top of a ChatGPT. Like, they should be very, very concerned. I think that if you can build proprietary data sets and you can, master one thing, you become really valuable to them. But the real answer is this. We have gone from being a SaaS company. We will sell you a platform or a service to almost, a managed service provider or outcomes as a service, where this is just something that's taken care of for you.
Yeah.
I don't need to, go check my models or worry about it falling apart or have somebody that's good at vibe coding. I've got my guys, they take care of it for me. And that was not possible 2 years ago to give that level of service and detail to every customer. But AI is making it in a way today that we really can work with them.
And when you say, I love the term outcome as a service, are you charging then a platform fee, or is it more based on outcomes and users say, like, by using us, you're going to, if you use us properly, you're going to have a 50% increase in X, Y, or Z. That is your outcome.
I would so love to charge a percentage of the outcome. I think one of the things I struggle with is it kind of puts you at odds with your customer in some ways. I don't want to sit down and have an argument at the end of the month that says, well, we feel like we helped you this much. And they're like, well, no, I did all these other things. I want us to win together.
Yeah, right. I've tried doing that and it sucks because they always have a million excuses for why they didn't hit it. This why I think this thing changed it. And you have to argue, well, our software did exactly what it says, but your team didn't follow it.
Totally. But maybe if we were booking meetings for people, it'd be an easy success fee. But no, right now we're still on the old SaaS charging per location. It's like $5 a location. But I think that it's part of that arc of things are going to change. And I don't know exactly how.
$5 a location, that is so low.
Yeah, it is.
That's crazy. Okay. So then going back to like the sort of maybe adoption curve AI stuff, given what you're building and everyone else in who's building technology overall, but certainly in the restaurant space, if a company is a laggard, like, so your point about like Silicon Valley, everyone's adopted these things. Totally get it. I agree. But at some point, competitive pressure is going to require these companies, or this is my thesis, going to require them to get going. Like, in other words, if the restaurant that I compete with, right, if there's a Jimmy John's and a Jersey Mike's, and the Jimmy John's has adopted my software, your software, and they are 20, 30, 40% more profitable, does that force the Jimmy John or Jersey Mike's who doesn't have any technology to figure this out ASAP, or did they get left behind, or does it not matter? Like, in other words, like, what do the competitive pressures do to create adoption? Because I do think one of the biggest challenges for AI adoption, companies are a lot slower to adopt than the Silicon Valley types like myself like to imagine. But I wonder what competitive pressure will do to force that change. If you want to stay successful, you need to adopt X, Y, or Z.
It's really sad, but restaurants go out of business quite a bit. It's a game of attrition. I think the odds are, 90% of new restaurants that open don't make it 2 or 3 years.
I mean, it's like it's worse than doing a technology startup, and the upside for a successful restaurant are far lower too. So you have a 90% failure rate, and your 10% that succeed are, I don't know what the outcomes are, but I assume most numbers like maybe it pays enough for you to have a nice lifestyle, and like you're not going to be a billionaire from it.
Yeah, and so the sad truth is, I'd sign 5-year leases. If I make bad decisions that make me unprofitable, I'm probably not going to renew my lease in 5 years. So there is a slower, progression there. I read a fascinating article today. You think about like quiet quitting, people just being disengaged at their jobs and withdrawing. It's not this, mass revolution where the employees revolt, but this slow pullback. We're seeing that same thing in restaurants today. Prices are going up, service isn't necessarily matching it, labor costs are going up. People are having a conscious or unconscious dilemma where they say, maybe I just won't go eat out one extra time a week, right? And they're pulling back. And I think that the restaurants that'll win are going to be the ones that not necessarily adopt technology to interact with the customer, but how do they reallocate more staff to creating a experience that more matches the pricing at today's restaurants, right? So it's all going to happen behind the scenes. Hopefully, restaurant, the restaurant that probably succeeds is the one that keeps the prices lower, keeps you with a great customer service experience at that same lower price, and is automating a lot of things in the background.
I mean, that is so a great way to go to sort of our lightning around a little bit, sort of some of the questions, the last questions I want to ask. Like, if there's one metric that restaurants obsess over, but shouldn't, what is that? Is it like a metric they're like, oh, this is the most important, but you're like, no, don't waste your time?
Profit margin. I say that to say one of the smartest people I know in restaurants, Doug Glendenning, a longtime industry guy, turned around many brands. He said the easiest thing to do is to manage downward sales. And that is to say, we're going to understaff, we're going to underportion, we're going to make the numbers look great while we slowly but surely just ruin our customer base, ruin the reputation of the brand. And so you even look at something like labor. Everyone's like, we need to keep labor under control. That's pretty darn broad. Maybe you're spending a ton of labor in the wrong spot.
Yep. Okay. So the margin part is where you're focusing in the wrong place. What is something that they ignore that they shouldn't? Like, what is something you actually should be focused on?
So like actual versus theoretical food costs is great. I have how much food should I have used as a percentage of sales, and how much did I use, right? So I actually have something to like benchmark it to. It's not just I need to get my profit margins higher, but there are 3 percentage points of lost food this week. How do we close that gap? Because that's standardized. It's not arbitrary.
And does that rule apply to sort of fast casual restaurants like a Jimmy John's or something, and also to sort of your sit down?
It applies to everybody. I mean, it applies to you could do it at your college bar. How many beers was I supposed to go through that I actually sold, and how many did I actually go through, right? My guess is there's a pretty good delta there.
Yep. What's your best operational advice you've ever received?
Go in and do the work yourself. Lead by example. I think servant leadership, especially in the restaurant industry, is invaluable.
I would argue that it's probably everywhere. If you are not the hardest, essentially, worker at your company or right up there, you can't expect anyone else to do it.
Adam, I got a question for you on that.
Yep.
So it was much easier in a restaurant because I could be the best slicer and best maker, bread starter and all these different, I could open the store the fastest. You go run a technology company and I can't be the best machine learning engineer. I can't be the best, customer onboarding person. I can't be the best, marketing person. In a lot of ways, our staff and team is so much more talented than me, right?
And that's a good team. What you should have as a team.
Yeah, but how do you think of servant leadership, or how do you think of being an example of like doing it the best in that world?
So a few things. One, there are some, I think, key things every company should follow. Like if you have certain rules for how you run your business. So as an example, what we do at Shore, we have task lists for everything. So we write down every single task, what we do, when we do it, when it's getting done. Those tasks should all then have clear explanations when it gets complete. And you should have time that you're tracking towards it for each activity. Now, we're a fully remote team, so that's important for us to sort of know, like, what are you doing? Also, of course, having the data around where you're spending your time helps us optimize our business. And that leads to optimizations for our customers is the goal. So I need to follow those rules as much as anyone else and say, okay, I want to track the time that I spent here. So for this podcast, when we're done, I'm going to go into our task for this podcast, write down the amount of hours that we spent on it, all those different steps going into it to really start to understand the data. That's one. Two, as a leader, I think a leader of a company, especially once you get past the very 10-person stage and you don't really know every single role, your job is to start asking really good questions and being able to do that. So one thing I'm doing for our marketing team is a little bit of, they're probably annoyed and it's relatively new. I think we can be doing better in following up on just basic stuff, follow-ups, making sure we know what's happening, when it's happening, why we're doing certain things, and being really detail-oriented. And so for a long time, I haven't been joining our marketing stand-ups that we have once a week. I'm going to rejoin those. And I've told the team that I expect them to have, we're going to go, as a stand-up, we're going to go over all the key tasks they did the previous week, all the tasks they have for this week. We're not going to go over every single one, but I want to see the list. What's on your list? Is everything updated? Nothing should be overdue. Everything, if it's overdue, there should be an explanation. It should be updated. So long way of saying the job of a great leader is to ask really good questions and have enough knowledge to be dangerous. Not to go do the job. You should have the humility to say, I'm not going to go do your job. But it should say, hey, look, are you satisfied with this outcome? And do you think this is the best we could possibly do? And if the answer is yes, and you don't agree, well, maybe that's the wrong person for the role. Most likely the answer will be, no, we probably could have done better. Then the question is, okay, as you said, why? And to go through the 5 whys, why could it have been done better? Why did I have to get involved to help you push you in this direction? And you keep going down that list and hopefully do it in a way that people like, I want you to be great at this. I want you to be great at your job. And I'm pushing you to get there. This isn't, I'm going to fire you because you missed something. This is, how do I make you better? And how do I make you really proud of the work you're doing here?
And that was actually where I was going to go with it. If you manage by tasks, which is not dissimilar to a franchise, right? They give you literally your task list that's been tried and true. Just follow it and execute. The motivational side, the creative side, do you find that running a task-based organization takes away from the creative and they, mindless, I'm going through tasks and executing every day? Or do you self-select to the right people that respond to that?
No, I don't think it takes away at all. In certainly the marketing side, they have full control over what tasks go in there. And they're just supposed to hit certain outcomes and metrics for like social media or all these different groups, right? Each one has sort of goals and metrics they're supposed to hit and target. How they get there is something that I'm not forcing on them. I'll have lots of ideas and they have the ability to say no to that. But so they have the creativity about it and they have to create how do I achieve that goal? So it's lots of creativity.
What advice do you have for somebody like me that hates task lists to their absolute core?
Why do you?
I legitimately do my best work when I have a bunch of tasks on the task list because I don't want to do the task list so bad that I'll go reinvent something in a crazy way just to justify the fact that I didn't do my task list.
Mm-hmm. So why do you hate a task list?
I have no idea. I'm sure there's some deep psychological reason.
But it sounds like you did a great job with it at Jimmy John's. Like there was not a task list, it was a checklist. That was sort of the same thing. It's like you have to open the store at a certain time. You have to clean up XYZ.
Urgency. And everything in a restaurant has to be, you have to get the lettuce sliced or you can't serve the lettuce on the sandwiches, right? It's not an optional thing.
So why is it different in a software company? Why isn't there a sense of urgency?
I think honestly, it's a leftover of you have a million things to do and you have very little time to do them, especially in the early stages when it's just a couple of people. And so you find that the things that are most important you have to get done. Turns out those were the things that you probably should have gotten done, right? So you kind of get almost used to the fact that just because someone says I have to do something, we can probably push it off a month. I don't know. I don't have a good answer for you. There are people out there that are type A and there are people out there that are type B. I'm far on the type B side.
So I would just say, I think for every founder and entrepreneur, the best ones in the world, and obviously I've done, 100, 120 plus episodes of this podcast, let alone my own 4 different companies. And I don't think I'm great by a long shot, to be clear. But I do think the ones who are the best have a clear bias to action, a very clear sense of urgency, and they do a good job pushing that throughout their team and saying I want you to do better, but we need to have this bias toward action. As a remote first team and when a chore, we don't like having a lot of meetings. That means people need to be good at writing down what they did, when they did it, and how they did it. So anyone can jump in and understand the current next steps, what is outstanding. Because I don't want to have to go to someone and send a message and be digitally tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, what's the status of this? That's a waste of my time. Why are you wasting my time? Because you were too lazy to write one sentence about what the last update was. Life's too short.
I've always defaulted to bringing great people and point them in the right direction. This is the outcome we're looking for. I don't care what tasks you do to get there, right? Let's get there. And I'm here to be a resource to you along the way.
Yes, that's correct. But I think even then great people. No one gets lazy, but if there's no sense of urgency,
totally,
it just takes a little bit longer than it should.
Yeah. Again, I acknowledge the fact that it's an important aspect, and you're kind of a master at it. I was just curious if you had any.
No, I'm not a master. I think I can be far better at it, but I appreciate that. Are there any habits or tools that you think made you a better founder?
Honestly, constantly asking why is a great one. I think probably one of the best habits. Sorry, I don't even think about these often because they're habits at this point. They're unconscious. Networking, I hate the word, but I love the mission. Building relationships with people has never been easier than it is today. Whether it's lunch club or boardy or getting on social media and connecting with others. When I ran restaurants, I lived within my 4 walls. I didn't have any social media. I probably get to have 4 conversations a week with some of the most interesting people that I should never have gotten the ability to meet and interact with. And it has broadened my perception of the world and skill sets and business in a way that I had never imagined. So a habit, go meet new people.
How do you force yourself to go do that? How much time do you set aside to go do that? And then how do you metric out the ROI of spending time meeting new people versus building new product?
I think it's a little bit more one of those when in doubt, just go. If you're having a conversation, it's all right, maybe I should go try and actually sit down and meet with this person, right? You always have that impulse and you're like, I have a million things. I need to get my task list done, right? Let me get that and maybe I'll get back to them. But just a bias towards when you have the opportunity to meet with somebody, just say yes.
And that's a good life philosophy in general. I try to, even when I get invited to things, I generally try to say yes. I used to be really good at going to events. I don't go to as many anymore. It's difficult.
I'll say this, picking up the phone and calling somebody, just old school, with no objective, but just to check in, it's a really powerful thing. I know when we were fundraising, one of the things I had to do was go ask a bunch of people to make introductions, this, that, and the other. And it was so stark because it felt like I haven't reached out to this person in 6 months. And now I'm calling to ask them for something. And I vowed, I really don't want to be that person, right? I want people to be excited when I call to catch up and tell me about things.
Yeah. That's actually reminds me of something I should go. One of the things I've wanted to do, I used to have a list of, I want to reach out to one person I haven't talked to like in a while, like every week, it was either every day or every week. And I had a spreadsheet for it. And I dropped off doing that. And it's something I need to get back to.
I also have an executive assistant that goes a really long way for somebody like me that's not as task-based. I can set up tasks and work with him and make sure that those tasks are actually getting done, but leave enough creative brain space for me that I'm not looking at it or thinking about it.
Totally agree. If you think through the single most important decision, like a piece of advice that you would give to any entrepreneur to be successful or achieve entrepreneurial excellence, what would that be?
Authenticity. At the end of the day, if you're going to go start a company, you want people to invest in it. If they're investing in you, you don't have any proof behind it. So they have to truly believe in you as a person. And I think that only happens if they know the actual person. I think, we live in a world where startups oversell and underdeliver, and it's hype. Yeah, I mean, you already brought up AI hype. There's just a lot of hype. I think that being authentic and real, when you sit down with the customer and say, we're an early stage startup. We haven't figured everything out. This is what we believe, and this is what we're building towards. And we think we could really help you. It may not be perfect right away, but, come on this journey with us. And I think it will make a meaningful difference in your life. Not only are they more likely to come on and engage, but they're a better customer because they're trying to give you feedback and they want you to be successful and they're understanding when you slip up. So again, just being authentic goes such a long way.
Yep. Authenticity is a great one. Matt, how can people find you if they want to get in touch, learn more, hear from you, you name it? Where can folks find you?
Yeah. If you go to, you can find us at ClearCOGS.com. You can find me on the Restaurant AI podcast. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. Love to connect with people. If you're a restaurant, reach out. Schedule a meeting on the website. We love talking with restaurants, even if it's not a fit. It's always good to build a relationship and get an idea of what's going on in the world of restaurants and AI.
I would say it sounds like they'd be crazy if it's not a fit. They all should be using you. Really appreciate the time. Your time is precious. So thank you for spending some of it with me. I appreciate you.
Adam, I appreciate you having me on. Thank you.